Well, good morning, LinkedIn. My name is Joel Bennett, and I'd like to welcome you to the very first episode of Practical Leadership, an opportunity for you to learn more about how to be an effective leader and how to create leadership habits into your daily work. So, if you're turning in live, I'd like you to say hello in the comments. This is a lot more fun when I actually know people are out there. So, drop in just a quick comment where you're from. Would love for you to light up that comment section all day long. Let's see who we've got. Hey, Deb, thanks for joining us. Kat, great to see you as well. Happy to have you here. And Happy New Year to you as well. Well, as you guys keep checking in, Ryan, good to see you. Jamie from Brooklyn, Iowa, just down the road. Great to see you as well. During these sessions, we're going to share thoughts and perspectives to give you something new to think about, to encourage you to take action on what you're doing and apply what you're learning, and really to come up with some real actionable steps to put this into practice in your daily leadership and into your team culture. And I say we because after today, I'll actually be joined by other guests. I've asked guests from around the world, leadership experts who I trust, who I respect, many of whom I love, to join in and just share their perspectives, share their experiences as well. So stay tuned to the end of the program, and I'll announce who we're going to be having for next week. So today's session is going to be on building leadership habits, something that's near and dear to my heart, and I'm excited to dig in with that. But what I'd really like to do is reinforce to you how much I would love for you to be an active participant, so that I don't just feel like I'm talking to a camera today. So feel free to drop in thoughts in the comments, questions if you've got them along the way. And if you're viewing this recording, you can do the same. I'd love for you to be active as well. I'm dropping your comments or questions, and as soon as I see them, I will answer back. And so, see, we've got a few more folks that have joined. Megan, David, good to see you guys. Sarah, fantastic to have folks from around Iowa and the States, even outside the States. Joe, good morning. Deidre, thanks for joining in Waterloo. Again, as you jump on, feel free to keep dropping in where you're coming in from. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I want to make sure that I stay somewhat on time today. I should have mentioned up front, I think LinkedIn for some reason makes this sound like it's going to be an hour long. My goal is always for these to be, somewhere around the 20-minute mark. Some may be longer, some may be shorter. We'll see how I do today. But we want to make sure that this is something that's practical for you and the time that you're investing as well. So on this thought process of building leadership habits, really the first idea I want to share today is that there is a difference between goals and habits. And we're just coming off the New Year's. A lot of people made resolutions, and we talk about, what types of goals we have for the year. And we use goals and habits interchangeably. And I think it's important that we don't. There is a big difference between those two concepts. So goals are typically focused around the what. And so what does that end state look like, or ideal state that we're really shooting for? And so, during the New Year's, we have a lot of people that focus on health. They may focus on relationships. They may focus on, professional goals, things like, hey, I want to lose 10 pounds this year, or I want to eat healthier. Or, from a business perspective, a leadership perspective, they may say, I need to build more trust with my new team, folks that I'm just getting to know. And all of those would be considered goals, right? But the difference between a goal and a habit is, while goals focus on the what, habits actually focus on the how. And so what specifically are you going to do to support the goals that you have? How are you going to get to that end, that ideal reality that you've put out there? What's that going to look like daily? So this is really focused on the how, or really around the action component of this. So again, if I want to lose 10 pounds, I may, instead of just setting a goal, I may put out a habit or establish a habit around taking a walk over my lunch hour. If I'm really focused on eating better, I may say that I'm going to make sure that there's a vegetable on my plate at every meal. And if I'm looking to build trust with my team, I may say, I want to schedule one-on-one touch points with my team each week, so that I make sure that we have an opportunity to connect. But to be able to even set up the how, that habit, to do that well, we must also be thinking about the why and be clear on our when. And so when I talk about why, what I'm really getting at here is the pain point that we're trying to solve for. What's that thing that we want to improve? And in many ways, what's the impact that we're trying to have? And so, sometimes when I work this through with leaders or with friends, and we talk about building new habits, one of my questions is, well, in this area, what happens if you don't improve? What's going to be the impact of that on you, on others, on your team? What if you try this and you fail? What's going to be the ripple effect? And so a lot of times that's going to be linked to your why. The other piece that I mentioned you got to get clear on is your when. And so when we think about a new habit, when are you going to apply that? What's your trigger in this? And so are there certain situations? Are there certain scenarios that you're focused in on? Is that, at the start of your workday, something you want to do to be more productive? Or is it when you find yourself in conflict with other people? Is it when you start to crave that big bowl of ice cream that's not going to support your health goals? But you need to make sure that you're clear on both your why, what's the impact, and the when. When do I need to focus in on this? And so there is a formula that we use to kind of create, positive, good habits. And there are three components to that formula. It's that there's a trigger, it's your when, your old habit, and your new habit, right? And it typically sounds something like this when we build them, and we'll get a chance a little bit later in today's session to do that. It sounds something like this: when, and that's the trigger, instead of, I'm going to then focus on my old habit, and I will, which will focus on my new habit. So when, instead of, I will. All right. So some examples of this. I used earlier the example of somebody wanting to build trust with their new team members. During the course of each week, instead of leaving it to chance, I will schedule touch points with my team to check in on their work or to make sure they have what they need. Again, when, when, instead of, and I will. And if we go to one of those health goals, let's say losing 10 pounds, I may say, you know what, when I start to crave ice cream, instead of, dishing up a heaping bowl of frozen love or frozen joy, I'll ask myself if I'm really hungry or if I'm just bored or stressed out. All right. So you can see how this is different. The goal is still out there, but the habit actually gets to the when and the how. All right. So if this is making sense to you, just let me know in the comments. If it's not making sense and you've got questions, drop them in there as well. I'm going to pause just a moment to see if anything comes in. But I would love to hear more from you on this whole thought process of setting up new habits. And while I do that, welcome Carolyn, Mark. A few others have joined since we started. David, I'm so glad you're picking up what I'm putting down. Sometimes I don't know what I'm putting down, so I'm glad you're picking it up. Sarah, thanks. We'll see if my advice continues to be positive. Deborah, yep, that trigger is going to be important. We'll talk about that here in just a minute too. Cat, clear, clean, and specific, accessible. Very good. Well, let's keep moving through this. I do want to kind of come to the second idea that I think is important to share today, and that is that winners and losers often have the same goals. And so this is where goals and habits are going to look different. And this idea was originally shared by James Clear in his book Atomic Habits. If you like this whole thought process around building habits, Atomic Habits is really readable. It's a fantastic book. I've read it a couple times now. If that appeals to you, you should check it out. But Clear actually said that it's possible for both winners and losers to have the same goals. And that may not seem right on the surface, But I want you to think about what really sets those two people apart. And he would say that it's the processes, it's the systems, it's the habits that they actually create to translate their goals into reality. So let's just use an example from what's going on right now. So the NFL is in full swing. There are 32 teams in the NFL. Every single one of them, when they get the team, the coaches, the owners together at the beginning of the year, somewhere on their list of goals is going to be winning the Super Bowl. Every single one of them. But at the end of the season, when the Super Bowl is done, only one of those 32 teams will have achieved that goal. And so why? Why does that happen? Well, there are things about talent and coaching and all those other things, but what's important is it's not really about setting the goal. If everybody set the goal, but only one person actually achieved it, it's about creating the systems and processes, those habits, those mindsets that we need that reinforce the activities that we need to do to stack success upon success upon success to reach our goal. And so that's why you see some teams in the NFL, certain coaches, for example, that have created cultures there, mindsets there, habits, repeatable processes that get them in a great position to win the Super Bowl every year. Guys like Bill Belichick come to mind, who've been around forever. Even players like a Tom Brady, or I think of a Peyton Manning, some of those in the past where they have a process they use every day as part of that process. And it reinforces that the goal that they have out in front of them. So that brings me to the third idea I want to share for today, and that is if we're going to create new habits and we want to make room for those new habits and behaviors, we actually have to say no to others. See, adding more habits, especially new habits, rarely gets you where you want to be. Think about it, we always talk about adding more things to our plate. And so if you think about your big, heaping plate of things you've got to do, you also have a plate of, and typically a heaping plate of habits you've already created. And unfortunately, some of the bad habits are the ones at the bottom of that plate. And so if we just, throw new habits on top of that, typically those new habits, because the old habits are established, are just going to slide off. And they're not actually going to make it into the way that we live our life. So it really is about what you don't do as much as what you do. And so the first step to really understanding this process is to be brutally honest regarding where you're at, what your current issue is, and what bad habits have you created that are associated with that, right? And sometimes this is the toughest part of the process for people, is to be honest with themselves. And so what we need to do is get clear on the situation. Where does this typically rear its ugly head? Are there certain scenarios? Are there certain times of day? Are there certain people that kind of set us off or kind of push us into falling back on that bad habit? And then the next piece here is, once we understand what the old habit is, that bad habit that we're trying to replace, what we want to do now is to create a new habit that we want to replace it with. But it's really important here that we get concrete and clear on what that is. So BJ Fogg, who's another author, he's also kind of another guru in the change and habit building movement. He wrote a book called Tiny Habits. And in Tiny Habits, he shared that one of the things he wanted to start doing is to get in better shape. And one of the things he wanted to do was to actually do more push-ups each day. And I think he set a goal like he wanted to do 100 push-ups a day, which to me is about 99 more than I could probably currently do. But he realized too that doing 100 push-ups a day, he couldn't do that all at once. And for him, even starting that seemed pretty daunting. But what he realized was he could start really, really small. And so what he did, he decided, he works in his home. He decided that every time he goes through a doorway in his house, that he would drop down and do one push-up. And you heard me, he's going to do one push-up, right? He's starting laughably small. But here's what happened. What he was doing is creating space each day to apply a new habit that allows him to do more of the thing that he wants to do, right? And so you may say, well, what's one push-up do? Well, if you think about how many doorways there are in your house, and if you work from home, maybe you can relate to this. You take a little walk, you go through 2 or 3 doorways, that'd be 2 or 3 push-ups that you wouldn't have done before when you just set this goal of 100. Now, here's what's even more remarkable. what BJ Fogg realized was every time he dropped down to do a push-up, which at the beginning felt really silly, once he was down there, the amount of effort it took to get down there and the effort it was going to get to take to get back up, he really, when he got down on the floor, realized, well, if I'm going to be down here anyway, I might as do as many push-ups as I can while I'm here, right? And so maybe he would hammer out 5 or maybe 10, and then he'd get up and he'd go on with the rest of his day. And over time, each of those individual successes built on the habits, the processes, the systems, those successes led him closer and closer to his goal of doing 100 push-ups a day. And so this thought process of creating space and actually creating the habits to fill those spaces start to shrink and get rid of those old habits and start to create new ones. And so what I'd like to do right now is to pause real quick. I want you to think about the last year of your life. And for many of us, 2022 may have been a time for us to feel like we're getting back to normal. For others, it was kind of a chance to redo on some things that have happened in the last couple of years. But I want you to think about the last 12 months. And I want to think about a goal that you may have had and what habits that you built in. And maybe just share what are some laughably small habits that you put into place that helped you get to a different place by the end of this year. And so to get us started, while you're dropping some of yours in the comments, I'll use this example. I told myself at the beginning of the year, I need to make sure I'm drinking more water. I need to phase out, some of the other things that I'll drink upon occasion, whether it's soda or sugary drinks or coffee or whatever else. And so one of my laughably small habits is in the side closet here in my office, I have a case of water. And every day when I walk in, I grab one of these and put it on my desk. And throughout the day, I sip on this as much as possible. And my goal in a day is to at least drink 3 of these. And so when I walk in, I grab one. When I leave for lunch, I put another one on my desk. When I get back from lunch, I actually put a second one on my desk. And as silly as that sounds, having it right here makes it easier for me to actually jump in and drink it, right? And having 2 on my desk in the second half of the day reminds me that, hey, I need to make sure that I'm drinking water before I go home. All right. So interesting to see if anybody else has some examples, laughably small habits that you've put into place that have actually helped you reach your goal in the last year. Just looking at a couple of comments here that also came in. Yeah. I've seen Carolyn's comment here about this time of year, New Year's resolutions. A lot of time we try to take on too many new goals or too many new habits. And there is a fair amount of research about how many habits you can actually create at once or really focus in on. My inclination or my advice to most people is focus on one thing, one specific thing for 30 days and practice that habit as much as possible daily. At the end of the 30 days, if you feel like you've made progress, great. If not, you double down on that or maybe modify or adjust it. For others, maybe you get to the end of the 30 days and realize you still got a lot of work to do. And so understanding that, maybe you set that goal and play it out again. All right. Seeing a couple come in. Evan, I had a BJ Fogg-like habit. Every time I come to my office on the 3rd floor during a day, I do 10 reps of an activity. I love that, Evan. That once I get through my water bottle frenzy here, I may start doing that. Maybe some no weight squats or something like that. Kathy, drinking a full glass of water before each meal. That's a fantastic one. Does 2 things really to help you hydrate, but also fills your stomach a little bit. Maybe it helps you eat a little bit less. And Catherine, taking 5 minutes to write down deliverables due for the week, and then attending to them when you have 30 to 60 minutes. You end up checking them off and feeling more motivated to keep going. That's a great one as well. I have a lot of people that I work with in leadership that when they set new goals, one of them is around kind of prioritizing or building time into their day to understand what they should be working on. And so, just this, hey, first 5 minutes of my day, I'm going to pull out a Post-it note and write down the top 3 things I need to work on today. Really simple, takes almost no time, but can have a pretty meaningful impact. Thanks for sharing in the comments. Feel free to keep dropping stuff in. I love seeing it. Could maybe serve as well as some great examples for other people who are working through this same process. So I want to maybe end today with the big question, which is how do we put this into real practical application for the week? So first off, I'd like you to take a few moments and just kind of follow along with me. I want to take you through a quick activity. It again will be very simple, but I want you to focus in on something that really matters to you, not something that matters to me or matters to other people, but I want you to choose something that matters to you. And so what I want you to think about is a goal that you have for yourself in 2023. And so if this is a goal around improving your leadership in some way, perfect, let's start there. That's part of what this is about. But if not, feel free to use a personal goal. And if you want to actually do this in the comment section, that would be great again. But we'll be adding more to it as we go. So as you start typing and before you press send, wait for me to tell you to do so, because I'm going to have you put a couple of things, a couple of wrinkles into this before you share it with the world. So the other part is, if you're not ready to share this with the world, just grab a piece of paper, a pen, and just kind of scratch this out as we go. But it's important for you to maybe take the time to think about it while we're together today. So let's start with that. Take 20 seconds, 30 seconds right now. What's a goal that you have for yourself in 2023? And again, try to just focus on one goal as we go through this activity. All right. I'm going to now have you just kind of switch gears. Now that you've got your goal down, I want you to take it a step further, and I want you to write out what you feel like is currently in the way. What's been a barrier or a challenge for you so far in implementing this? For some of us, this goal may have been something we've had before and just didn't reach. But what got in the way? So I want you to get clear on what are the issues, the barriers, or even just the bad habits that have gotten in the way of you achieving this goal in the past, or things that could be potential, barriers, obstacles, constraints that you could see cropping up. And I might have you take, again, 10, 20 seconds to capture that as well. And this is a good point. If you're watching this as a recording, feel free to pause so you can catch up with us. I don't want to hurry anyone through this process. So feel free to pause, but go ahead and capture what are those things that are getting in the way. All right, and so here's the last part. What's the one small habit that you could start even today that will support you in reaching that goal? And again, if you want to think about what's the laughably small goal, or excuse me, small habit that would help you get to your goal. You can always start small and get bigger. But if you start too big, typically, if it doesn't work, we throw everything out altogether. So what could be that laughably small habit that you could start with today to support you actually reaching that goal? And if you can, use that formula we mentioned, when instead of and I will. All right. So take 20 more seconds, 30 more seconds. Go ahead and capture that. And then once you've got that done, feel free, if you're doing this in the comments, you can go ahead and push submit and drop that into the chat. Also, if you're struggling with this, feel free to drop me a note in the chat. You can also, if you don't want to do it to the public, you can also message me through LinkedIn. And I'll answer back as quickly as I can to kind of help you come up with the habit that you may try to be creating. wait a little bit for these to come in due to the delay. Joe, I love what you've got here. The small habit to get there, clean sheet of paper to build a list of potential resources. It is interesting what a clean sheet of paper, when we talk about lists, can do. If some of you are kind of old school and remember some of the Franklin Covey workshop stuff, one of the things they would talk about is prioritizing your list for the day, obviously scratching things off, and then the next day you rewrote that list. And so starting with a blank sheet of paper is kind of like new possibilities, new priorities. So that's kind of a cool one. Thanks, Joe. Kathy, instead of jumping into your day or your email and tasks, I'll spend 10 minutes reaching out to 3 people in my network. I love it. Love how you're using the formula there. David, the goal was to exercise 3 times a week. Barriers of work and travel. A laughably small habit today: when the day is done and winding down and I haven't exercised yet, instead of going straight to some relaxing TV time, take 30 minutes to exercise. David, I think this is a great one. I'll even give you a tip. Last year, my wife and I got a treadmill a few years ago, actually in the midst of COVID, I believe. And we actually mounted a TV right next to our treadmill. And I will tell you, I walk at least 10% longer if I can just watch a program while I walk. And so sometimes you can do both those things at once. But I love how you're setting this up. Any others coming through here? All right. While the rest of you, if you're going to do it in the comments, go ahead and do that. Just keep pushing submit, not commit. But I want to maybe end our session today with this. LinkedIn can be used for a lot of different things. And many of you come to LinkedIn for a lot of different things. But today I'd really like to use it as a bit of a catalyst for action. And for some of you, maybe a little bit of accountability. So you invested the time today to actually come to the session to learn more about effective leadership, or more specifically about building leadership habits. But that investment will be completely wasted if you don't do something with it. And study upon study has actually supported this. An hour from now, you'll remember less of what we just talked about than you will a minute from now. And tomorrow, if you haven't done anything with it, you'll probably forget at least half of it. And so what can you do today that will actually allow you to move one step forward and make sure that this investment was well worth it for you? So with that in mind, as we leave today, I'd like you to share something that you're going to commit to doing over the next 7 days to take your leadership to the next level. What could you do with your team? What could you do with your coworkers? For some of you, you lead your own companies. It could be your family. But what one small thing could you do to commit to over the next 7 days to improve your leadership and take it to the next level? And so once you have it, go ahead and drop that in the comments. It's good reinforcement for me on what you're taking out of the session. And when we get together for next week's session, and I hope you'll be there, you can share how it went. So take 15 seconds now, share that into the comments, and let's set it in motion. And hopefully we can give you some encouragement, maybe hold you a little bit accountable once you say it to the world, and see how your week goes. So one last thing, I mentioned earlier that next week will look different. And so I mentioned that I'll have a guest, and it'll no longer be a one-man show, which is perfect for me. No one's happier to have somebody else join him than me right now. And so I'm really excited to announce that my first guest is going to be Mark Bloodsworth, owner of Lifeblood Performance in Melbourne, Australia. Mark is one of the most enthusiastic and energetic guys that I know. I think you're going to see that from him as soon as you hear him speak on the program. And he and I plan to talk about the topic of passion-driven leadership. And he's really the first person around that topic that I thought of when this topic came up. So keep your eyes on the LinkedIn postings for that session. Or if you'd like, go ahead and drop your name in the comments. If you want me to personally invite you, I'll make sure that comes straight to your inbox so that you don't miss it. So again, I want to encourage you to take something that you've heard today and to put it into practice, again, as soon as today, so that you can be the leader that your team needs. And if you found this useful, absolutely, I would love to see you back here next Wednesday. And if you're willing, and you think there's somebody else that may have interest in this, please share it with them. You can share the link to this video or share the invite for next week's session. And if you stumbled upon this video and we're not connected, feel free to reach out with a connection request. Let me know that you saw the program, and we'll see that we can connect. But regardless of what you do, I just want to thank you again for taking the time and joining us today. And I hope to see you next week. And as you go across this topic, working with your team, I hope that you have the success over the next 7 days that you hope for. Have a great rest of your week. Blessings.